Mrs. Hartwell finally made her dream come true with her first ever airplane flight, never imagining that one of the flight attendants was her long-lost daughter she hadn't seen in over 25 years. Ms. Hartwell stood at the bustling Atlanta airport, her hands trembling with anticipation. She had never flown before, and the sheer size of the planes outside left her in awe. Staring at the massive aircraft, she whispered to herself, shocked by the sight, "My God, that metal can's gonna fly up there and not fall." Anxiety gripped her as she imagined what it would be like up in the sky. Her trip had a special purpose. Ms. Hartwell was visiting her brother and nephew who had lived in Florida for many years. It had been ages since she last saw them, since her brother had moved to another state about 10 years ago. The physical distance and her brother's busy schedule as a businessman in the fishing industry made it tough to meet up, and now with age catching up to her, she feared losing the connection with her nephews, who must be around 25 by now. While waiting to board, Ms. Hartwell received a call from her brother asking when she would arrive. With a hint of humor, she commented, "Ah, Harold, my brother, what you make me do? Getting on one of these metal trains to come see you in Florida. I'm expecting a lot of fried fish to make it worth it." Harold laughed on the other end of the line and asked, "Have you boarded yet?" "Not yet, I'll be there tonight," she replied, her voice tinged with apprehension. As the conversation with her brother continued, Ms. Hartwell headed to the airport cafe and observed the hustle and bustle around her. Her anxiety and fear grew as she imagined what awaited her aboard the plane. Her trembling hands showed she was more nervous than expected. Amidst the cafe chaos, a scene caught her off guard. A little girl, about 5 years old, walked by with a toy airplane in her hands. Ms. Hartwell's gaze fixed on the child, and she was swept away by a deep, emotional thought. "You used to love flying too when you were little, my daughter." For a moment, it seemed a tear might escape. "I wish you were here with me," she referred to her daughter, lost over 25 years ago, a loss that still haunted her. Then, the gentle voice of the airport speaker interrupted her thoughts. "Ladies and gentlemen, passengers of Flight 2795, please proceed to Gate A for boarding." The moment to board finally arrived, and Ms. Hartwell stood up, her heart racing, unaware of the unimaginable surprises that awaited her aboard the plane. After entering the metal giant and finding her seat, Ms. Hartwell settled in and felt her tension grow. Sitting in her seat, she looked around, trying to find a sense of calm that was far from reach. She reassured herself, "I'm here. Finally here, it's going to be all right," as if trying to soothe her rapidly growing fear. As the flight attendants began detailing the safety procedures and giving pre-flight instructions, Ms. Hartwell watched the attendant in front of her, explaining the information. The young woman seemed so confident that the metal train was safe, and something in her gaze conveyed that confidence to her. "She must fly all day, right?" thought the elderly woman. "Then it must be reliable, shouldn't fall." She tried to convince herself that she was in good hands on that aircraft, though her heart beat unevenly, and the tension persisted. When the plane finally took off, Ms. Hartwell clutched her seat, feeling the acceleration and initial turbulence. She was clearly tense, trying to relax by closing her eyes and taking deep breaths, but as soon as she saw the view from above, of clouds and cities below, she realized how spectacular it was. "Jesus, this is truly splendid," she whispered softly, impressed by the beauty unfolding before her. Once the plane stabilized in cruise, the flight attendants began offering drinks and snacks. The attendant responsible for Ms. Hartwell's row approached with a friendly smile. The elderly lady ordered a cup of tea and watched the young woman as she prepared the drink. There was something about the young woman that made her feel comfortable and safe, as if she were a familiar presence. Looking into the woman's eyes, Ms. Hartwell found her incredibly beautiful, which reminded her of her own youth. She couldn't help but warmly compliment her. "You have a beautiful smile, my dear." The attendant returned the compliment with an equally radiant smile. "Oh, thank you. You are wonderful too." They quickly established a genuine connection, sharing a moment of complicity. At that moment, the soft voice of the pilot sounded over the speakers, announcing that there might be some turbulence but assuring that the journey would be smooth. The expression on Ms. Hartwell's face changed immediately, and apprehension took hold of her. "Is this your first time on a plane?" the attendant noticed Ms. Hartwell was frightened and asked with empathy. "Yes, my dear, I've never flown. I'm dead scared, I confess," she admitted, laughing to try to dispel her growing fear. "Don't worry, I do this every day, but I assure you, It's incredible if you allow yourself the experience of flying through the skies among the clouds, the attendant reassured with a comforting smile. There was something special about the young woman. The confidence she conveyed made Ms. Hartwell feel lighter. "You're in great hands, huh? Oh, and the pilot is my husband," the woman whispered in Ms. Hartwell's ear, making her laugh and feel even calmer. The elderly lady even began to enjoy the journey. The flight continued, and everything seemed to be going well. She was calmer, and the attendants moved back and forth, serving the passengers. It would be a few hours until they reached the capital of Florida, and Ms. Hartwell tried to enjoy the flying experience. She chatted with the person across the aisle, savored the meals served aboard, and generally felt well. However, sometime later, the plane went through turbulence. It was a sudden and unexpected jolt that sent Ms. Hartwell into panic. She began to cry and gasp, clutching the seat. "We're falling. The plane is going to crash," she said amid her despair. Ms. Hartwell closed her eyes tightly, fearing the worst. Seeing the woman's state of desperation, the attendant rushed to calm her. The young woman held her hand with compassion and tried to reassure her, explaining that such turbulence was common and that the plane was safe even if it shook that way. "It's okay, we're not going to fall, okay? You can relax," the attendant assured her. However, the turbulence continued and worsened. The aircraft kept shaking, and in response, the pilot announced over the sound system that all passengers should return to their seats and fasten their seatbelts. Seeing that Ms. Hartwell was alone and upset, the attendant sat next to her. "Calm down, Ms. Hartwell. Look, when I'm really scared, even when I wake up in the middle of the night with a nightmare, do you know what I do?" the young woman asked empathetically. The woman, still trembling, asked, "What?" "I sing. I'm going to sing something that calms me down a lot, something that someone very special used to sing to me, okay?" At that moment, Ms. Hartwell had no idea what was about to happen. The attendant began to sing, and although Ms. Hartwell was still terrified, she listened attentively as the melody filled the cabin. Her heart began to beat faster, and she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "It can't be," she thought, looking at the young woman beside her. Ms. Hartwell recognized the song being sung, as it was the same tune she had made up for her little girl, the song she sang to the girl when she was scared, had a nightmare, or heard thunder. Her daughter had been lost for more than 25 years. Ms. Hartwell was paralyzed, staring intently at the young woman, and was transported back in time to that fateful day, a memory that had haunted her for years. She was a young, single mother at the time, 35 years old. On her daughter Morgan's 5th birthday, Ms. Hartwell decided to take her to the park to celebrate as the little girl wished. It was a special day because there was an event at the park with a Cinderella theme, which the little girl loved due to the recent release of the movie. The park was crowded with children having fun, stalls everywhere, and the mother repeatedly warned her daughter not to let go of her hand and to stay close. "Stay with me, Momo. Don't wander off. You could get lost," Ms. Hartwell cautioned with concern. At one point, the girl got very hungry, and both headed to a queue at a kiosk to get some snacks. However, while they were in line, a school friend of the mother spotted her and came over to greet her. The two started chatting, and as time passed, Ms. Hartwell noticed that Morgan was strangely quiet. When she finally looked, the little girl had disappeared. It was an indescribable moment of despair for the young mother. Her friend helped search for the little girl, and both went to the local police, reviewed the park cameras, but due to the crowd and the girl's height, it was impossible to see clearly what had happened. The park had blind spots and was full of people. Days dragged on, and Morgan was not found. Ms. Hartwell suffered deeply, blaming herself and lamenting the loss of her daughter. She considered herself the worst mother in the world and carried an unbearable burden of guilt. Despite her brother Harold being her rock, they were a poor family and did not have the means to continue expensive investigations or hire detectives to find the little girl. To make matters worse, after a few months, the police declared the girl dead, and the pain of that mother continued. For as much as she believed her daughter was alive, she wasn't sure, and it consumed her. Years later, Harold and his family moved to Florida, leaving Ms. Hartwell alone in Atlanta. She deeply missed her little girl every day. However, fate was preparing an unbelievable twist, and on that airplane, when the attendant finished singing the song Ms. Hartwell used to sing to calm her girl in times of fear, the lady ignored her fear of the turbulence because what mattered was understanding the origin of the song. "Where did you learn that song, dear?" she asked, her eyes brimming with emotion. The attendant looked kindly at her and replied, "Well, it might sound crazy, but it was in my dreams." Ms. Hartwell was stunned. The young woman then explained that since she was a child, she had always dreamed of a woman with red hair and green eyes who always soothed her in her dreams and sang the same song every time she had nightmares. It was as if this woman was there when the girl needed help. Then, Ms. Hartwell, now with tears in her eyes, asked, "And what's your name, my dear?" "Morgan," she replied with a warm smile. "My name is Morgan." "Oh my God." The lady began to cry, tears streaming uncontrollably from her eyes. She was certain that the woman beside her was her daughter, lost for 25 years. The attendant was also somewhat moved, though she didn't fully understand what was happening. Touched by the elderly lady's crying, she asked what was going on. Amid sobs and tears, Ms. Hartwell managed to say, "It's me, daughter, it's me, your mom." Morgan was paralyzed for a moment, looking deeply into the eyes of the woman, as if searching the depths of her memory for some connection that could confirm the incredible twist of fate. Ms. Hartwell continued to speak with a trembling voice of emotion. "Do you remember, daughter, the park, your 5th birthday? We went to the park, and in an instant." A flicker of certainty shone in Morgan's eyes, and she whispered in disbelief, "Mom, is it really you?" The two launched into a tight embrace, tears of joy rolling down both their faces. There were no words that could fully express the happiness they felt at that moment. It was the reunion that seemed impossible, a mother-daughter union separated by tragic circumstances but finally reunited aboard the airplane. The passengers and flight attendants watched the touching scene unfold as Ms. Hartwell and Morgan looked at each other with gratitude and love. Applause began to echo and fill the aircraft, the passengers' celebration of hope and union, a recognition of the incredible twists that life can take. Those two souls, two poor souls, cried, but they were tears of joy, tears that washed away decades of anguish and separation. Ms. Hartwell hugged her daughter tightly, unable to believe that the reunion was truly happening. "I knew it, daughter, you were alive. I knew it," Ms. Hartwell murmured between tears. The attendant then explained what happened to her on that fateful day at the park. She recounted how she had followed a young girl dressed as Cinderella and, when she realized, had gotten separated from her mother. The girl frantically looked for Ms. Hartwell but couldn't find her. Her mother was lost in the crowd while Morgan cried in a corner, scared and unattended. It was only after a while that a compassionate couple found her. The man picked her up, and he and his wife spent hours desperately searching the park for the girl's mother. However, due to the circumstances and the little girl's young age, they couldn't get enough information to locate her, such as a name, phone number, or address. As the months passed with no success in finding the girl's mother, the couple decided to adopt her, giving Morgan a life of comfort and luxury, something Ms. Hartwell, due to her financial difficulties, couldn't provide for her daughter. The girl grew up happy, receiving all the best things and having the love and care they could provide. However, Morgan, even as a child, had turned her trauma and the figure of the missing mother into a kind of personal entity. The memory of her became like an apparition, centered around this red-haired woman with green eyes who sang the song that always calmed her when she was scared. She had no idea that this song would lead her to reunite with her mother after 25 years of separation. Then, after the emotional reunion on that flight, the two exchanged contact information, promising to meet again and start building the relationship that had been interrupted. The news quickly spread through the airport in Florida, where everyone celebrated the incredible twist of fate and the union of a mother and her daughter. Sometime later, back in Atlanta, Morgan introduced her husband, the pilot of the plane, and her family to her mother, with whom they shared an emotional meeting. Ms. Hartwell met her daughter's adoptive parents and had no words to express how grateful she was for taking care of her girl when she couldn't. The parents were also happy to see Morgan reunite with her biological mother and understood that an important part of their daughter's life had returned to her. The reunion between the two continued to be an incredible experience, with years of updates, stories, and memories to share. It was a challenge for both to understand that after so much time, they could finally be part of each other's lives. After all, although they were mother and daughter, they were also strangers who needed to get to know each other again. Ms. Hartwell felt immense joy in her soul, realizing she was no longer alone. Her daughter was back in her life, and the fact that Morgan also lived in Atlanta was an additional blessing. Ms. Hartwell was thrilled to discover that she had become a grandmother. The flight attendant and her husband had 2 children, a boy and a girl, who would now be the precious grandchildren of the elderly lady. This only increased her happiness, surrounded by love and family, something she had longed for a long time. What she couldn't experience with her daughter, perhaps she could now live with her grandchildren. The life of the elderly lady was suddenly filled with family gatherings, family dinners, and special occasions that she shared with Morgan, her son-in-law, and grandchildren. And all this happened because of a simple airplane trip that, in the end, showed that incredible things can happen no matter how many turbulences in life we have to face. What do you think of this story? Do you think they acted right? Leave your comment below to know your opinion. It is very important to us. If you liked this exciting story, help us by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Thank you very much for watching us and see you in the next story.